All right, so for tomorrow's quiz, there's only two main topics we're going to be covering, which is solving quadratics by using the quadratic formula, and then the other one is the complex numbers, okay? So we're going to do complex numbers last, because that's a lot easier, but let's start off with quadratics and solving them using the quadratic formula. Now remember, the formula looks like this. Okay, so x equals to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay, so that's the formula you're going to be using for these problems. Okay, now some of them are going to tell you to use your calculator to find the actual values, so we'll do that. Okay, and then others will just tell you to solve it using the most simplified form. So for this one, we're going to just do it like normal. Okay, so we're going to plug this into our formula. Now I am going to write my ABCs here. So A is 2, B is 3, and C is negative 2. All right, and now I'm just going to plug in my values into my equation. Now I'm going to not write my equation, I normally do, but it's already there. So I'm going to just kind of assume that it's there, right? So I have m equal to negative of a b, which is negative 3, plus or minus the square root of b squared, that's 3 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 2, divided by 2 times a, which is 2 times 2. Remember, this is the part that I keep telling you, you're going to mess up here. If you're going to mess up, it's going to probably happen right here. Okay, because we're not careful. Maybe we multiply something wrong, we do something wrong in our calculator, unfortunately. So like I've been telling you guys, focus on the inside of the radical first. Okay, don't worry about trying to input everything into a calculator. Just do the radical and that number on top. So we get m equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared is 9, negative 4 times 2 is negative 8, and negative 8 times negative 2 is a positive 16, all over 2 times 2, that's 4. All right, so I have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 plus 16 over 4. Now we are going to simplify that square root still. Just keep working on that until it's as simplified as possible. This is 25, okay, over 4. Now, what's the square root of 25? 5, right? So I'm going to put m equals to negative 3 plus or minus 5 over 4. So now you're going to have to solve for your answers. Now notice that I don't have any square roots left over, so everything can actually be simplified. So I'm just going to drag this over here really quick. My two answers are m equals to negative 3 plus 5 over 4, and m equals to negative 3 minus 5 over 4. Remember, you have to write the plus and the minus side to it. So negative 3 plus 5, that's 2. So this gives me 2 over 4, which is half. The other one, negative 3 minus 5, that's a negative 8. And negative 8 over 4 is a negative 2. So here are my two solutions. Negative 2 and a half. Okay, so a negative 2 and a positive half. You guys have any questions on this one? All right, so now I want to work on a question like this, but I want this one to basically say, use a calculator to solve. Okay, so use a calculator to solve. That means your answer is going to be like a decimal. Okay, so I do have my equation still, okay, for solving these things, but remember, it has to be set equal to 0. So first thing I got to do is I'm going to subtract 5r from both sides. So this looks like this. R squared minus 5r minus 8 equals 0. At that point, I'll write my ABCs. So A is 1, B is negative 5, C is negative 8. And then I'm going to plug that into my formula. Okay, so R is equal to, again, the formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. If you want to write it down, go ahead. I'm going to skip that step for now just for the sake of saving space. So negative of a b, that's negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared, that's negative 5 squared, minus 4 times a times c times, so a is 1, c is negative 8, all over 2a, so 2 times 1. So there's all my values, negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2a. Again, just take your time with this stuff, okay? You're supposed to get these questions right because you're just plugging in numbers into a formula. Like, you really aren't supposed to mess these up, but this is where it messes up, so we got to be careful with that. So we get r equals to positive 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 plus 32 over 2. 25 plus 32 is 57. I'm going to go over here. R is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 57 over 2. Okay? And at this point, I'm going to have to, well, here I would stop. Okay? If I was doing this test and all it said was solve, then I would be done. Okay? I would say I'm good here. All right? So this is good. All right? But if they tell you use a calculator and round it to the nearest hundredth or something like that, that means I got to calculate these answers. I got to figure out what r equals to 5 plus radical 57 over 2 is, and what is r equal to 5 minus radical 57 over 2. I got to do both. Okay? So I'm just going to use Desmos just for the sake of simplicity, because Desmos will give it to me in decimal form. So just give me a second. Let me call up Desmos here. I'll go down to the scientific calculator. Again, you guys will have those calculators. I'm just going to use a scientific calculator. All right, so one of the answers was 5 plus radical 57 divided by 2, right? So I'm going to put, well, let me delete that. Hold on. 5 plus radical 57. That's 5 plus radical 57. Divide that answer by 2. I can't do that. Well, all right, let me type it in. 12 point, let's say 549. Divide that by 2. And my answer is 6.2745. So let's say I want to round to the nearest hundredths. So the nearest hundredths would be the 7. So 6.27. That would be one of my answers. So let me go back. So R is equal to 6.27. And now the other answer, I got to do 5 minus. Okay? So let me go back. So 5 minus the square root of 57. That's a negative 2.5498. So I'm going to put negative 2.5498 divided by 2. I'm supposed to divide by 2. And my answer is negative 1.2749. So if I round to the nearest hundredths, it's negative 1.27. Okay? So I'll go back here, negative 1.27. So here are my two answers. So in yesterday's homework, they asked you to do this twice for 2 problems. They said use a calculator to actually calculate the answer. So there you go. Now I know some people will tell me, well, on my calculator, it wouldn't go past the 5 plus radical 57 over 2. It won't give me the answer. There's a button on the calculator that looks like this. I think it's right above the erase key, the AC key. like that, S and D. Standard to decimal, okay? So if yours doesn't want to give you a fractional answer and you want a decimal, press that button, okay? So press this button on your calculator. Some of you guys may have a different button. I can always help you with that. But the ones that I have here, it looks like that, S to D, or D to S. And that'll give you your decimal answer, okay? So you guys are going to have questions like this to do on your quiz where you're doing quadratic formulas, okay? Plugging it into a quadratic formula and solving. Sometimes you can just leave your answer as normal numbers like this one was right here, okay, -2.5. Or maybe like the top box, maybe it just says solve, but it doesn't say to use a calculator to simplify it. So if it just says solve, you can leave it like that, like the top box. If they say solve by using a calculator and round, that means you got to use your calculator and find the decimal answers. So it could be like the bottom box as well. Okay, so like I said, yesterday's homework had a little bit of everything, right? It had normal answers, answers with radicals in them, and also decimal answers too. All right, so from here we're going to move over to the complex numbers. And these, I think most of you guys thought they were easy, so I hope you did, because that makes this part easier for you guys. There are a lot of questions based on this. So we're just going to simplify. So 6i squared. 6i squared. So the quantity of 6i squared. So 6 squared is 36. I squared is I squared. But remember, what is I squared equal to? -1, right? So that's equal to -1. So that's 36 times -1, which is -36. And there you go. So there'll be questions like that. Look at question number 4. 3i times a -2i. So we're going to multiply 3 times -2. That's -6. And I times I is I squared. But we know I squared is -1. So -6 times -1, that's a +6. All right, so there's that problem right there. Any questions so far on those? So I squared is -1, okay? Now, you'll notice that my powers change when I multiply, but when I add and subtract, they don't, okay? So -4i minus 6i, that's just -10i. And you're done. It doesn't become I squared or anything like that. So pretty easy. There are questions like that on your test. Like I said, I usually take your test and I look at it and see what you guys need to know. This one's a little bit more involved, and I think after that we do graphing, yeah, and those are pretty easy. So, so number 6, distribution. Okay, so you are going to have to distribute. So we'll distribute the greens and the blues. So let's do the greens first. So -2 times 6, that's -12. And -2 times -4i, +8i. And now let's do the blue ones. 3i times 6, +18i. And 3i times -4i is -12i squared. Combine your like terms in the middle. So 8i plus 18i, that's 26i. So -12 plus 26i. Minus 12 times -1. Remember, I squared is -1. So -12 times -1. So that's a +12. So let me just write this out really quick. So what happens with negative 12 plus 12? Cancels out, so all that's left is 26i. So there you go. So there will be distribution problems and stuff like that. Are we okay so far? Because the next stuff is graphing. I think most people like this, I think. So whenever they want you guys to graph this, remember we call this the imaginary axis and the real axis, but you can still think of it as x and y. You can rewrite a complex number as a point. Okay? This one becomes what? What is my point? For negative 3 plus 4i, what do I write? Negative 6? Negative 3, and then a 4, right? So I'm just going to go to negative 3 and positive 4, put a dot there, and there's my a. What's the point representation for this one down here? 1, negative 2, thank you. So 1, negative 2, that's right here, and there's b. Remember, just treat them like x, y. Questions on this one? All right, so last ones look like this. So these you're just supposed to write it as a point, okay? Or sorry, write them as a complex number from the point. So what I would recommend for you, for point A, write down the point. So what is the point for point A? What is my coordinate for that? Negative 2 what? 1, okay. So then all you have to do is the negative 2 goes in the front, and then the 1 goes next to the I, and there you go. Negative 2 plus 1i. What's the point for point B here? 3, negative 1. So you're just going to write 3 minus 1i. You don't have to put the 1 if you don't want to, but it's fine if you do. Okay? So if you had a point right here, let me just add an extra one here. We'll call it C. What's the point for C? What's my coordinate for it? Negative 3, negative 3. So for this one, I would write negative 3 minus 3i. Okay? I think you only have one of these type of problems and one of the other type of problem, like this one right here. So there's not a lot of those. But they're not hard to do. So that's what your quiz is on tomorrow.